we're going to ask you during the actual presentation if you can keep muted, which means that it improves the transmission across. But the other thing, because we're all obviously isolated, is possibly if you could put in the chat area where you are geographically. I've started it off, if you can still see that in the chat. And I'm based in, where is it still up there? I'm based in Bournemouth on the south coast. So I think it'd be very interesting if people could sort of add in where they are, where they're just seeing this, because it was there's a very wide spread. I've got South Wales has come up, Edinburgh, well, that's good. Aberdeen, great. And it's, oh, sunny Southport. Oh my goodness me, you're doing better weather than we are. Very overcast down here. So that sounds really good. Herefordshire, sounds good. Portsmouth, Bournemouth, another one. Oh, great. Okay, just keep it going, because I think it's rather nice to actually know where everybody is. North Hampshire, no pizza delivery. Oh, now that, oh, that's sad. Some people have real problems. Now, as we've got to the start time, what we're going to do is go through, take the questions at the end of the session, and if the questions run out, then we'll have a very short sort of split up into breakout rooms afterwards, and then discuss a little bit about what's gone on during the presentation, then maybe come back and just raise any other questions. Now, we're extremely lucky to have Michael Murray, who's going to actually present, and leaving you to actually, Michael, to introduce yourself. But this is the follow-on for a session from one of his colleagues, Cher, did the presentation earlier in the year to talk about this code. And we're very lucky because I persuaded Michael to actually come back and give a follow-up around about September 2022, when this code should be thoroughly established. So watch this space, because I think this is very, very important, and keeping the children safe is one of the key things. So at that stage, I'll pass across to Michael. Thank you.
Thanks, Margaret, and thanks for inviting me to come back. Just as a way of introduction, name again is Michael Murray. I'm Head of Regulatory Strategy at the Information Commissioner's Office, or the ICO. For the last little more than a year, I've been working and leading one of our teams that's been working on the Children's Code, or otherwise known by its formal name, the Age Appropriate Design Code. So this presentation will sort of, I guess, pick up on what Cher talked about early on, although she focused a lot more in detail on the different standards and the technical elements of it. I'm going to give you a bit more of an update about what's happened since. And for those who weren't here, we'll do a brief introduction to the code anyways, and then we'll talk about what's going to happen next. Now that the code has gone beyond its transition phase. But I'll just start off now. So for those of you who don't know, the Children's Code, otherwise known as the Age Appropriate Design Code, is a statutory data protection code of practice for providers of online services that are likely to be accessed by children, even those services that are not aimed specifically at children. The ICO is mandated by Parliament to produce the code through the Data Protection Act. The code is grounded in the UN Convention on the Rights of the Child and highlights the importance of organizations considering the best interest of children in their products and services by embedding data protection by design and default. The code aims not to protect children from the digital world, but instead protect them within it by ensuring online services are better designed with children in mind. The code translates the UK GDPR principles for processing children's personal data into 15 standards of age-appropriate design. I'll spare you from listing all 15 at this stage, but all 15 and a detailed description of what each includes is on the ICO website. The 15 standards of age-appropriate design set out the ICO's expectations for Internet Service Society providers, service providers. The standards span fundamental privacy principles for things like age-appropriate design, good practice for high-risk data processing, such as profiling, data sharing, geolocation tracking, etc., and effective design for service design for children. So, example, how you set out privacy and transparency notices and settings, for example. The code's statutory footing means that the ICO and the courts must take it into consideration when relevant. We have various powers to take action under the GDPR and PECR, which is the sort of electronic communication regulations, including where children's personal data is involved. The tools at the ICO's disposal include assessment notices, warnings, reprimands, enforcement notices, stop processing notices, and penalties or administrative fines. For serious breaches of the data protection principles, we have the power to issue fines of up to £17.5 million or 4% of annual worldwide turnover, whichever is higher. So we have that in our power, although the ICO would prefer to work with industry and with the internet society services who would be subject to the code to help them conform the code without having to require any sort of enforcement action. I just got stuck in my presentation here. Next.
Michael, can I just interrupt for a moment? There's
Yeah.
2 people in the waiting room. I don't seem to have the priority to let them in.
Okay, let's see if I can.
Thank you. Thanks.
Okay, no problem. Let's see if I can get my screen to work now. This seems to be frozen. Oh, there we go. Okay. Let's go back and forth. Okay, great. The code applies to what we call information society services likely to be accessed by children and young people under the age of 18 in the UK. So it applies to all services that UK children or young people would access, even those that are not based within the UK. And information society services are any services normally provided for remuneration at a distance by electronic means and at the individual request of a recipient of the services, and covers many online products and services used by children, such as websites, apps, games, social media services, connected toys, and other devices. So this covers all the major social media companies, most popular games and streaming services, online retail, connected devices, often used by children. Now, we call it connected toys and devices, so it also include things like smart speakers and Fitbits and sort of fitness devices as well. So why is the code important? Online services are a fundamental part of children's everyday life, but the internet wasn't designed with them in mind. The code aims to protect children from data-related risks and to help create a safer online space where their rights are respected. This is important as children are more vulnerable to risks arising from the use of their data, as they may be less aware of those risks. They may lack the capacity to protect themselves, or their data may be used in ways that they don't foresee or understand. This can include intensive profiling and tracking, exposure to harmful targeted content, low privacy default settings that promote dangerous interactions with other users. Some may ask, why does this matter if young people are getting the service they want for free? Well, these risks can lead to a wide variety of both privacy-related and other harms, which can have a severe impact on children's physical, mental, and/or emotional development. The slide includes an image from 5 Rights that I think is really useful to describe this process of the types of data that we know some companies collect about children. It's wide-ranging and forever. It's intimate and has potential impacts on children's future relationships, opportunities, and identities. but this isn't obvious to young people and often not to adults either. It's a bit scary to consider that some companies know what time your children go to bed, what they're reading before they go to bed, what time they wake up, and who they're talking to. The code helps organizations to address these risks with the aim of changing children's online experiences for the better, and also ties in with our own commitment to protecting vulnerable citizens, one of our regulatory priorities of the ICO. So the ICO has been providing support and engagement for organizations within the scope of the Children's Code. This was to ensure that the regulatory impact of the code was understood so that organizations could transition clearly and confidently towards implementation. So for the last year, this work has included commissioning independent research, conducting industry engagement events, webinars, and workshops for hundreds of companies, developing policy positions, guidance, and the Children's Code's best interest framework, developing UX design guidance to show designers and companies how the code can work in practice, and establishing an expert children's advisory panel made up of the likes of Parent Zone, Internet Matters, ChildNet, the UK's gaming organization UKI, Age Verification Providers Association, the Children's Commissioner, amongst many others. Much of this work, along with the FAQs for business and related blogs, can be found on the Children's Code Hub on the ICO website. The transition year has ended and the Children's Code came fully into force on the 2nd of September 2021. We've made it clear to organizations that fall within the scope of the code that they are now expected to conform with the 15 standards it sets out, or those standards that are appropriate or to them. However, we recognize the code is an ambitious change to online services and that fully conforming to the code may take longer than 12 months. As such, we'll take an appropriate and proportionate approach to supervision and focus on the areas where there is potential for the greatest harm to children. We will continue to respond to complaints and to data breaches, looking to see where these might include children's data and consider if there have been any code conformance issues in these cases. The ICO will be prioritizing our proactive regulatory efforts initially on sectors where our research suggests that there's potential for the highest risk to children, notably social media, streaming services, and online gaming. In these sectors, children's personal data is being used and shared to bombard them, in some cases, with content and personalized service features. This might include inappropriate advertisements, unsolicited messages and friend requests, privacy eroding nudges urging children to stay online and to make in-app purchases. We're concerned with a number of harms that could be created as a consequence of this data use, which include physical, emotional, and psychological, as well as financial harms. By taking a risk-based approach, we can build on this knowledge so we know where best to target our resources in order to achieve the most impact. However, all Internet Service Societies in scope of the code should be working on conformance and taking the steps needed to keep children's data safe within the Internet. We haven't yet decided what approach we'll take in relation to the sectors that are deemed medium to low risk. However, some of the options being available include looking to see what progress companies are making on conforming with the code. For low-risk sites, we could be looking to see that they've, for example, completed a data protection impact assessment, are working on improving their transparency policies, privacy notices, and ensuring that privacy is set at high, geolocation and profiling are set off by default, for example. So even though we've identified these three main areas that we're going to initially focus our attention on learning more about how they process and to work with them to improve their processing. Every company that falls within scope should be doing what they can. If we receive a complaint from a child or a parent for a medium to low risk service, we will still investigate it, and we will be looking to see how they have conformed with the code. So what further support are we going to offer? Although the transition period has ended, we will continue to offer support to industry. Conformance with the code is not locked into one place in time, but a continual effort. So we're keen that the ICO remains engaged and supportive of industry's efforts to embed the code's standards into practice. We are working on age assurance opinion, which will help organizations to understand how they meet the code standard on age-appropriate application. Our auditors will be doing a number of voluntary audits with ISS, with Internet Society Services organizations, which will both help them to achieve conformance and further our understanding of those standards where further support might be needed. Work with other regulators continues through the Digital Regulation Cooperation Forum to help ensure consistency between the code and the incoming online safety laws and the video sharing platform regulations managed by Ofcom. Our regulatory sandbox is currently supporting 2 organizations with the development of GDPR compliant age assurance technologies, and another sandbox project of relevance to the code has recently been completed. The exit report will be published this autumn. As well as working with industry to help them conform with the code, the ICO wants to raise awareness of the code and children's data protection rights among children and parents and carers. As a complement to the benchmarking survey of industry awareness, which we have run and continue to run, the ICO is running a benchmarking impact analysis in order to understand the awareness and impact of the code on children and parents or carers, to assess trends of awareness in these communities and look to see where we need to make more effort to increase awareness. We will track levels of awareness and report on our findings as part of the Children's Code Impact Evaluation due in September 22. As I mentioned earlier, reacting to complaints will remain a key driver for the ICO's regulatory strategy. A view of our complaints, however, has only identified complaints from children in the low single digits. This is clearly too low, indicating a lack of awareness of the ICO amongst young people, a lack of awareness of their rights, or how to find redress when they have a problem. We're reviewing our complaint system and language used to simplify processes for all users and to make the system more intuitive and easier to navigate for children. In addition, we are training our staff on how to handle complaints from young people. We will continue to work on complaints at ICO and enhance cooperation with other organizations that children and young people are likely to contact with the problem, with the goal of enabling more effective referrals for data processing issues. We also know that for many young people and their parents, the first step when they have a problem is to conduct an online search to find an answer. We will be undertaking a number of focus groups with parents and young people in the autumn to identify the types of questions that they're likely to type into a search. We will then develop answers to those questions so that the ICO website and our children's code resources help provide a roadmap to a solution. We will also continue to engage with civil society to raise awareness of the code and are open to invitations to participate in conferences and workshops that target children, young people, and parents. Media engagement has already been positive. This image on you can see now is a double-page spread in the Week Junior that appeared in July, the first time that the ICO has featured in that publication, which is great. And we have another article in the Week Junior coming up later this month. We're also working with the BBC on further stories to raise awareness in the places that children look for information, including the Own It website. My colleague and educational leader, Garrett Grouse, reminds me that good schools are more than a school. They are places that care for the well-being of their children and families, and that will, for this, go the extra mile, as was evident during the height of the COVID lockdown where this picture was taken. We recognize that schools have had and will continue to play a vital part in supporting the digital resilience of their pupils and through the kids also of their parents. Schools are already involved in children's safeguarding and raising awareness thereof with children, young people, and parents and carers. The Children's Code, in some ways, is an extension of this. Schools are at the heart of their communities, and they know their parents and carers better than any other organization, and are able to engage parents and carers in the education of their children. So engaging with schools is a key part of our strategy to reach children and parents. This engagement includes answering schools' questions on how the code relates to them and to the EdTech services they use. We will also be publishing clarity on these questions on the Children's Code Hub and explaining our guidance at school events this autumn. School events in all 4 countries of the UK are planned to explain the code to teachers and school leaders, and to promote new school materials that have been developed this year. We produced a suite of school resources for children to use when discussing privacy issues and the value of personal data. The lesson plans cover what counts as personal data, why it's valuable, and how to keep it safe when using social media. The resources are free to download and to use from the ICO website. We also produce a set of worksheets for each with PowerPoints to facilitate discussion. Over the coming months, we will be adding to these resources with a set of lesson plans specifically on the Children's Code and an infographic that can be used as a handout to support awareness raising at home. This is a copy of the drafting infographic, can be seen on your screens, with some of the key messages that we want children and parents to learn about the code and their data rights. This is not the final design. We've had some input from our Children's Advisory Panel on a few changes that they would like to see. So we hope to have the final version of the infographic and the code-specific lesson plans ready for early October. So although the transition period for the code has ended, we continue to work on further resources and engaging with all relevant stakeholders. This slide outlines some of the key remaining outputs and milestones related to the code. As well as these outputs, we are developing further products for online services and children and parents for the remainder of the year. So this includes some sample DPIAs for online services to review, aimed more at small and medium-sized enterprises to make it easier for them to understand what we're looking for in a DPIA, and to guide them on how to develop their services better. An opinion on age assurance will be published later this month or early October to help organizations understand how to conform with our age-appropriate design standards. Parents and children's benchmarking awareness will start happening later this month, with our further tracking happening later in this year or in early 2022. And the lesson plans and infographic within the month. Further benchmarking for IFF that's being done for us by IFF Research Company, measuring the awareness of the Children's Code by industry and how far they've progressed in conformance. And as I mentioned earlier, the focus groups later this year. Ongoing engagement remains vitally important to support the code. So we continue to engage with industry, explaining the code and giving feedback on the work companies have done to date on conformance. We are meeting regularly with the large social media companies and expanding that work into new areas such as the companies that produce guides for online shopping for small enterprises to create their own websites using the sort of e-commerce systems. We're also offering proactive companies the opportunity for more in-depth support and feedback through our voluntary audit program. We continue to work with industry representative bodies to answer code-related questions from their members and communities, and are engaging with DCMS and the Digital Regulation Cooperation Forum on related issues, including age insurance, online harms, and wider digital regulation. The code is relevant to all companies that are likely to be accessed by UK children and young people, including international companies. So we're aware that companies have a challenge when trying to comply with the mosaic of regulation across countries. So we remain engaged internationally to support the development of children's focused regulation. At the moment, for example, we're talking regularly with our colleagues in Ireland's Data Protection Commission about their plans for children's fundamentals guidance. And we'll continue to develop our understanding and regulation related to age assurance. This year, we have already supported the Age Check certification scheme on the development of their children's code and age assurance certification. We're supporting an age estimation project in our sandbox to improve the accuracy of age estimation for young children, and will engage with the age assurance and safety tech sectors to support innovation in this area. The ICO will review the impact of the code over the next year. At the end for the year following the transition. We'll be gathering data and stakeholder feedback to support our reporting. As mentioned, we're also conducting benchmarking research to measure trends and awareness of the code over time amongst industry parents and children. This research will be used to demonstrate the impact of our work during the code transition period, in addition to developing lessons learned for future similar projects of work. We're already seeing responses from big tech companies, which show that they are making changes to the way they use children's data. Positive developments to date include Facebook and Instagram limiting targeted advertising to children, and Instagram giving children users under 16 private accounts by default. Google is introducing a range of changes to children's users, including improved transparency designs for children, a new policy for children and parents to request removal of their images, and blocking ads targeted at the age, gender, and interests of children. YouTube have turned autoplay off by default for users 13 to 17, with bedtime and take a break reminders part of their new digital well-being features. TikTok have announced that all users under 16 will have their accounts set to high privacy by default. Teens will be prevented from receiving notifications past 9 p.m. for the 13 to 15-year-olds or 10 p.m. for 16 to 17-year-olds. And direct messaging to 16 to 17-year-olds will be off by default and not available at all for the 13 to 15-year-old users. Conversations with stakeholders from the gaming companies also suggest changes are progressing in how they conform with the code. We anticipate that changes will be both progressive and continual, especially as technology develops. We receive more feedback from internet users and the changes taking place. The code is now into its business as usual status at the ICO, and we are looking forward to its standards becoming business as usual at internet providers as well. That's it for this presentation. Thank you for your time, and now ready and open for any questions.